Hey, good morning. I'm Paige Browning. It's Wednesday. This is Seattle Now. Seattle Mayor Bruce Harrell has a message to the feds this week.
Stay out of Seattle.
Harrell came out with this caution about his city because President Trump has ordered the Oregon National Guard to be deployed to our Northwest counterpart, Portland. The Rose City is preparing for troops to hit the city as soon as this week. Today, we talk with Conrad Wilson, who covers legal affairs for Oregon Public Broadcasting. But first, let's get you caught up. Boeing's got a plan to get back on its feet again. It's designing a new plane, according to an exclusive Wall Street Journal report. This commercial plane would succeed and maybe replace the 737 MAX, the plane model that went down in 2 fatal crashes in the last decade, causing a string of safety concerns. But Boeing did not confirm reports that the project is underway. A spokesperson told the Seattle Times the company is instead focused on its backlog of orders for 6,000 planes. Minimum wage alert. Seattle just set the new rate for next year. The minimum wage will go up 54 cents an hour to at least $21.30 an hour. That kicks in January and is set by the Seattle Office of Labor Standards. It gets updated each year based on inflation. And a little sports note, although the Mariners don't play their first MLB postseason game until Saturday, you still have a chance to see them play. The team's hosting open scrimmages today and tomorrow at T-Mobile Park as the Mariners prepare to either play Detroit or Cleveland. Today's scrimmage is at 2 o'clock. Check back for more headlines on tonight's episode of Seattle Now.
We don't need the National Guard here. We don't need the United States military here. We don't need President Trump continuing his reckless and destructive behavior in the great state of Washington.
We do not need the federal government bringing in armored vehicles, semi-automatic weapons, military personnel to make, quote unquote, us safer. There is not an insurrection here.
Political leaders, including Seattle Mayor Bruce Harrell and State Attorney General Nick Brown, are warning President Trump not to deploy federal troops here. They don't want the situation that's unfolding in Portland, where 200 Oregon National Guard troops have been authorized to deploy there. Trump has referred to Portland as, quote, war-ravaged, following ongoing protests outside an ICE facility there. Conrad Wilson covers legal affairs for Oregon Public Broadcasting, and he's here to help us understand what exactly is going on. Hey, Conrad, I know you're busy. Thanks for taking a few minutes with us.
Great to be here, Paige. Thanks for having me.
The basics first. So Trump has ordered up to 200 National Guard members to hit the streets of Portland. What is happening there today, and how soon could troops actually be deployed on the street?
So, Paige, just before I got on the line with you, I was outside the Immigration and Customs Enforcement building, and there were about a dozen or so people. There were news crews, but it was quiet. You know, it's a sunny day here in Portland. The street was open, cars were going by, buses. There was no evidence that the National Guard was there.
How soon could they be on the street?
That's a moving target at this point. You know, we have been trying to nail that down with the Oregon National Guard. They have said, like Thursday's a possibility, but a remote possibility. That would be if things went real fast and, looking more like something that would take place next week.
Okay. And Conrad, help us understand up here in Seattle, why did this deployment happen? As far as I understand, the president decided to take the step because people have been protesting at the ICE facility there.
The why is honestly a question that many folks here have, from public officials to demonstrators. I want to be clear, there have been some pretty big demonstrations, and at times they have gotten spicy. I mean, there's been tear gas, but that's like back in June. I mean, even the Portland police chief said yesterday that, they had 2 arrests over the weekend, and that was the first time there have been any arrests that they've made in that area outside the ICE building in months. I mean, and so I think anybody looking at this would see that there is protests, and there are certainly moments when protesters cross the line, and law enforcement does take action. I've seen water bottles thrown or rocks, but that is not what is happening 99% of the time. It is relatively peaceful and often very calm. You had asked about what made the president do this? I mean,
Right.
that is an open question. And what he said is that, it's lawless, that this ICE facility is being attacked. And there had been a sense that this could happen. The governor's office, the Oregon Attorney General's office had been preparing for this as a possibility, especially as the president would kind of bring up Portland in the Oval Office while talking about other National Guard deployments to other cities.
Sort of dangling it there.
Absolutely.
So, Conrad, it sounds like for locals there's sort of a question of why is this happening all of a sudden? Well, Trump has referred to Portland as war-ravaged. Is that the feeling amongst locals, or what's the reality there?
No, it is not war-ravaged. I think even folks who maybe are supportive of what the president's trying to do, we've been speaking to people all over the state. There is a sense that, it maybe has some public safety issues that certain, folks would like to see addressed. But a military deployment, it is a really extreme measure. The ICE building is a very small area of the city, and it's not even in the urban core. We're talking about kind of a couple of blocks around a building.
So you're really not even seeing it if you don't go to this area of Portland intentionally.
You don't. It's near the Willamette River, kind of sandwiched between Interstate 5. I mean, it's disruptive to the neighborhood for sure, but it isn't something like that's, bringing the city to a grinding halt. Having covered the 2020 protests as well, I can just say this is nothing like that at all. I mean, this is isolated and small by comparison.
So how has the city of Portland and the state of Oregon responded to Trump wanting to deploy National Guard troops?
They've asked him not to. They have said, please don't do this. This is not necessary. We heard that in many public sentiments over the weekend from the governor to the attorney general to Portland's mayor, many other elected officials as well, just saying this is too extreme. And they've also filed a lawsuit, basically trying to block this deployment from happening.
Okay, and OPB, your station, has reported that Oregon's governor, Tina Kotek, spoke with President Trump on the phone on Saturday and then texted with him again through an assistant on Sunday. What did those conversations reveal?
Obviously, they didn't change the equation.
Okay.
I mean, the order was still put through by the Trump administration to call up 200 members of the Oregon National Guard, federalizing them. Governor Kotek did say, something to the effect of she told the president in very plain language that this was not necessary. Later, publicly, she sort of said there's just a disagreement about what's happening.
We have free speech demonstrations that are happening near a federal facility, one federal facility. Portland Police is actively engaged in managing those with the federal folks who are at the facility. And when people cross the line, there's unlawful activity, people are being held accountable. This is not an insurrection. This does not require military troops in an American city.
I'm talking to you today from Seattle, a city that Trump has mocked and criticized many times, despite it brimming with events and sports and business activity and the like. But his first troop deployment in the Northwest is Portland. Can you just walk us through some brief history of Trump versus Portland? When did he start having it in his sights?
I mean, this is something that goes back definitely to the first Trump presidency, right? And there was a lot of protests that came out of the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis, the killing of George Floyd by police. Portland was one of the many cities across the country that just had massive show of solidarity. And they were peaceful for a long time. Of course, things then started to sort of devolve where there was more confrontation. A lot of the protests took place outside of our federal courthouse, which is downtown. And, by the time 2020 was out, I mean, there had been hundreds of federal law enforcement officers that were sent to Portland to sort of protect the building, do crowd control. And it really became big scenes every night with hundreds of protesters, clouds of tear gas, police marching through the streets, protesters running. So, that's sort of the backdrop. Those have subsided and the city has done a lot to recover. I mean, it's just a very different city. And there really is not the appetite to go back, from what I've heard in talking to both protesters and public officials, who are very opposed to what the president is doing. There's no appetite to go back to 2020, even remotely.
And many Portlanders now are surprised or mad Trump has targeted their city with this deployment, and some could show up to protest. What are government leaders right now advising residents to do?
They definitely have asked folks to show up if they have something to say about what the president is doing, and exercising their First Amendment rights. But they have said at the same time and as emphatically that, it must remain peaceful. This is not something that can get out of hand. They've used phrases like, don't take the bait. And I think there is just this sense that it is a pretty extreme measure to federalize the National Guard and send sort of a militarized force into the city. And that actually, could be creating a problem rather than solving one.
Conrad, this situation has led, maybe surprisingly, maybe not, to some humor coming out of Portland, the Rose City. Portlanders have been posting photos of the war-ravaged city, pics of the waterfront, their brunch, quirky finds in Portland. I saw a joking plea for help saying it's so bad they're low on artisanal cheese and homebrew. How are you seeing this backlash play out?
I mean, it is something that folks have had a lot of humor with. There is so much concern that, some folks have just tried to make light of a situation that sort of feels a little absurd in some cases to folks. At the same time, I think it's important to also hold in that same space that if the National Guard does end up deploying as it's expected to, that could be something that yields violence, and nobody wants to see that.
Mm-hmm. They want to keep Portland weird. Keep
They
it
do.
as it is. Well, that leads me to my other question, Conrad, which is it certain troops will be deployed? Do we know that? And if they're deployed, how long are they going to be there?
At this point, the National Guard says that they are moving forward with, they have an order to do what the president has said from the Department of Defense. They are kind of finding the 200 Oregon National Guard members. That being said, there is a very active lawsuit that is going to be heard Friday in federal court here. And I'm told, regardless of a government shutdown, the hearing will be taking place. And that is the state and the city trying to block the deployment from happening, basically saying the president has exceeded his authority. So we just don't know what's going to happen.
Conrad Wilson is the legal affairs reporter for Oregon Public Broadcasting. Conrad, thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Appreciate you listening to Seattle Now. Today's episode was produced by Andy Hurst. It was edited by Caroline Chamberlain Gomez. Our production team also includes Vaughn Jones, Brooklyn Jamerson Flowers, and Patricia Murphy. Greg Kramer does our theme music. Seattle Now and KUOW Public Radio are members of the NPR network. I'm Paige Browning. Talk to you next time.